It started with a broken nose. Not the grandfathers, not the fathers, the other boys. And that was the last straw. 17-year-old Lucas Brennan sat on the curb in front of Oak Ridge High School, hands stuffed deep in his hoodie, a thin trail of dried blood under one nostril, and a rage in his chest he couldn't explain, much less control. His phone buzzed with a message from his mom. "We'll talk when you get home." Then another. "He's on his way to get you. Don't fight me on this." He didn't have to ask who he was. 10 minutes later, a dusty forest green pickup pulled up, windows down, pine-scented air freshener swinging like a pendulum from the mirror. The man behind the wheel wore a flannel shirt rolled up to the elbows, a Red Sox cap, and a face that hadn't fully smiled in years. "Hey, kid," said his grandfather, Hank Brennan. Lucas didn't move. Hank leaned over, opened the passenger door. "You can sit there and sulk, or you can get in and sulk while we drive." Lucas threw his backpack in the bed of the truck and climbed in without a word. They didn't speak until they passed the last gas station on the edge of town. "You really broke the kid's nose?" Hank asked. Lucas stared out the window. "He said some crap about my mom," he muttered. Hank grunted. "Well, can't punch every idiot who opens his mouth, but I've wanted to." Lucas didn't smile. Hank didn't expect him to. They drove for 3 hours. Past the Pine Belt, past cell reception, past the last sign that warned "No services, next 40 miles." Lucas noticed the trailhead sign too late. Bear Ridge Wilderness Loop. Difficulty high. Weather advisory in effect. "Wait," he said. "This is a camping thing?" "I told your mom," Hank said, unbuckling. 3 days. Just you, me, and the woods. No screens, no punching. Lucas stared at him. "You said I was staying with you, not in a tent." "Surprise," Hank said, grinning like a man who enjoyed baiting fish and teenagers equally. Lucas stepped out, phone in hand. No bars. He looked up at the jagged peaks above them, snow still lingering in the shadows despite the late spring sun. Something cold settled in his gut. "I didn't agree to this." "You didn't agree to much of anything lately," Hank said, strapping on his pack. Lucas hesitated. Then, mostly to prove a point, he followed. They hiked for an hour before the first words were spoken. "You ever been up here?" Lucas asked. Hank nodded. "Used to hike it with your dad." Lucas scoffed. "That must have been before he became a part-time parent." Silence. Only the crunch of boots on gravel and the wind in the trees. Hank stopped and handed him a canteen. Lucas drank, wiped his mouth with his sleeve, then muttered, "This is stupid." "You're allowed to be angry, Lucas," Hank said. "I'm not angry," Lucas snapped. "I'm done." Hank didn't push, just walked on. They made camp by a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley. The view was breathtaking, endless trees, a distant river, clouds rolling over the peaks like slow waves. Hank set up the tent. Lucas built a fire from dry bark, trying to pretend it didn't matter that he knew how. It was quiet, too quiet, until Lucas pulled out his phone again. "Hey, no service. Still." Then a click. He frowned. It froze. He smacked the side. The screen cracked, then went black. He stood up. "Seriously?" Hank looked up from the fire. "Problem?" Lucas turned, furious. "Did you know this would happen?" "Nope, but I hoped it might." Lucas threw the phone to the ground. "This is BS. You dragged me out here to fix me or something? You think this is gonna make me suddenly okay?" Hank stood. The fire cracked between them. "I dragged you out here," he said slowly, "so we could get lost enough to maybe find something worth keeping." Lucas stared at him, chest heaving. "You don't know what I've been through," the boy snapped. "I don't," Hank said, "but I know what I've lost." Lucas turned away, and that's when the wind picked up. Hard, fast, wrong. Dust swirled. The tent flap slammed. The fire hissed out. Hank swore and grabbed the map. Lucas took a step back and tripped on the pack behind him. He hit the ground hard. By the time they gathered themselves, the fire was dead, and the map was gone. Gone, sucked off the ridge by the wind and swallowed by the forest. Lucas stood slowly. Did we just lose our way back? Hank didn't answer right away, which told Lucas everything. Lucas didn't yell, not right away. He just stood there, arms rigid at his sides, watching the last corner of the trail map flutter through the trees like a paper bird with better plans. Then he turned. "You brought me 3 hours into the woods with no reception, and now you've lost the one thing that gets us back." Hank didn't flinch. He calmly knelt by the fire ring and began stacking what was left of the dry kindling. Lucas kicked a rock. It hit a tree with a loud thwack. "This is so messed up." "Sit down," Hank said. "We've got light for an hour, and I need that fire up again." "You're not even listening." "I am. You're just not saying anything useful." Lucas stormed to the edge of the ridge, the fading sunlight catching the blur in his eyes. Behind him, Hank pulled a small metal tin from his coat pocket and opened it. Inside, a rusted old compass, a folded bandana, a dented matchbox, and a Polaroid photo, a man, a boy, and a chocolate lab sitting on a log with fishing rods. The boy in the picture had his father's nose. Lucas noticed, but said nothing. "Compass still works," Hank muttered. "Sort of." "That's reassuring." "I know this trail system," Hank continued, lighting the fire again. "We'll head down valley in the morning, follow the water. It'll lead to the ranger post eventually." Lucas didn't respond. Instead, he pulled his hoodie tight and sat about as far from the fire as he could without stepping into darkness. They ate jerky and shared a granola bar. Lucas refused the tea. Hank didn't push. That night, the temperature dropped hard. Wind slipped under the tent flaps like fingers. Lucas curled into his sleeping bag, still turned away. "Don't suppose you'll say good night," Hank said. Silence. Then, just as the fire outside hissed into coals, "I didn't hit him because of what he said about Mom," Lucas whispered. "I hit him because he was right." Hank waited. Lucas's voice was barely audible. "He said she only stays because she's scared to be alone, that if she had any self-respect, she'd leave both me and Dad behind." Another pause. I think I believed him." And just like that, the boy who hadn't spoken a full sentence all week unraveled. Hank didn't say, "That's not true." He didn't reach for a hug or offer a lesson. He just said, "I get that." "Yeah? When's the last time you felt like everyone you love is broken and it's your fault?" 30 years ago." Lucas turned over. "What?" Hank lay back in his bag, eyes on the nylon ceiling. "I walked out on your dad when he was 11. Thought I'd messed everything up so bad that the best thing I could do was disappear." Lucas said nothing, but he was listening. "I told myself it was noble, that I was giving him a better shot. What I was really doing was running. Did he ever forgive you?" Hank's jaw tightened. "He tried, but I don't think I ever gave him a real reason to." Outside, an owl called. Inside, the silence said, "Maybe it's not too late." In the morning, they packed up what was left of camp. No map, no signal, one compass. And for the first time, two people who didn't feel quite so far apart. By mid-morning, Lucas's boots had betrayed him. The left one rubbed his heel raw. The right one was soaked from an early stream crossing. He tried to leap and failed. With every step, he muttered some quiet profanity under his breath and shot daggers at the back of Hank's head. "Blisters build character," Hank called over his shoulder without turning around. Lucas gritted his teeth. "So does tetanus." The trail wasn't a trail anymore, just a thin deer path winding through damp ferns and overgrown underbrush. The sun poked through the trees and patches, but it was humid, and the smell of wet moss clung to everything. They hadn't spoken much since sunrise. Lucas was still digesting what Hank had told him in the tent about leaving his dad, about regret. And Hank, he seemed to know Lucas needed time. He only pointed things out when necessary. "Fresh claw marks on that tree, probably a bear." Lucas froze. "I said probably. Relax." "Relax," he says, 5 miles from the nearest bathroom. They crossed a shallow creek and climbed over a jagged line of boulders, Hank grunting as he went. Lucas had to admit, for an old guy, he was stronger than he looked. They stopped for water near a fallen tree, sun filtering through like honey. That's when they heard it. Crunching footsteps. Not theirs. Lucas stiffened. Hank's hand went subtly to the knife clipped to his belt. Out from behind the underbrush stepped a man in his late 30s camo jacket, hunting boots, and a fixed-blade knife hanging loosely in one hand. He froze when he saw them. So did they. Then, slowly, he lifted his free hand. "Whoa, sorry, didn't mean to scare you." "Bit late for that," Hank said calmly. The man nodded. "Name's Travis. I'm tracking a wounded deer. Bow hunted yesterday, but she ran downhill." Lucas kept silent. Hank gave a slow nod. "You local?" "Back countryside," Travis said. "Saw you smoke last night. Figured someone was off trail." "We lost a map." "You're about 5 hours off the ridge route," Travis said, eyeing them both. "You with search and rescue or just stubborn?" "Mostly stubborn," Hank said, "trying to cut down toward the river loop." Travis stepped forward, pulling a GPS tracker from his pocket. "Well, you're close, but you'll hit steep terrain soon. I can walk you part way. I'm heading west anyway." Hank glanced at Lucas, who shrugged. His eyes stayed on the knife. "Appreciate it," Hank said, "but we'll manage." Travis nodded. "Suit yourself. If you change your mind, I'm camping near Elk's Hollow tonight. Signal comes in sometimes up there." He tipped his head and disappeared into the trees like a ghost. Lucas exhaled. Hank raised an eyebrow. "Something about him bug you?" "I don't know," Lucas said. "He just felt like someone who doesn't apologize twice." Hank snorted. "Good instinct." They kept moving. By late afternoon, Lucas's blisters had become full-blown enemies. They stopped beside a slow-moving stream, and Hank unpacked their gear. Lucas sat on a rock, peeled off his boot, and winced. "I think I'm growing an extra toe." Hank crouched down and took a look. "Nope, just angry skin. Sit still." Without a word, he pulled out a small first aid pouch and began cleaning the wound. Lucas grunted, flinched, but didn't pull away. "Your dad used to get blisters right here," Hank said, tapping the heel gently. "He'd cry like a cartoon character." Lucas smirked despite himself. "I bet." They sat in silence. Then Lucas said, "You think we'll get back tomorrow?" "Depends." "On?" Hank looked at the sky. "On how much further you're willing to go before you stop pretending you're the only one who's ever felt lost." Lucas didn't reply. But for the first time, he didn't look away. The wind changed first. It swept through the trees with a low groan that made the pine shudder and the light dim all at once. Hank looked up immediately, eyes narrowing. Lucas felt it too, the shift in the air, like the mountain had sucked in a breath and wasn't letting it out. They were halfway across a ridge shelf when the sky turned gunmetal. Hank stopped, adjusting the straps on his pack. "We need shelter, now." Lucas scanned the steep incline on both sides. "Where?" "There's nothing out here but rocks and sticks." "Rocks and sticks make pretty decent roofs if you know what you're doing," Hank said. "Keep your eyes open for overhangs, cavities, anything." 10 minutes later, thunder cracked like it split the spine of the sky. Lucas jumped. Hank grabbed his arm. "We've got maybe 20 minutes." They stumbled over uneven terrain, pushing through wet branches and half-washed game trails. Rain started as a mist, then turned to sudden fists, cold, sharp, angry. Lucas slipped on a slick patch of mud and landed hard on his side. He cursed, sitting up. "Come on," Hank shouted over the wind. That's when they saw it. A narrow rock formation wedged between two hills, a natural alcove about 4 feet high, 5 feet deep, dry inside, barely. They crawled in together just as lightning lit up the world like a flashbang. Rain slammed down in sheets, soaking the outer ledge. Water streamed like veins over the rocks. Inside, they sat in silence, breathing hard. Lucas's hair dripped into his eyes. Hank's jacket clung to his arms like a second skin. "I hate this trip," Lucas muttered. "Good," Hank said, still catching his breath. "That means it'll stick." Lucas wiped his face with a damp sleeve. "I'm serious. Everything about this sucks. The weather, the walking, the food. You dragging me out here like some rehab project." Hank leaned his head back against the rock. "You think I dragged you out here for you?" Lucas frowned. "I brought us out here because I needed a reason to stop pretending I was done trying," Hank said. "I see my son and you the same silence, the same edge, and it scares the hell out of me." Lucas turned away, water still running down his cheek, but some of it wasn't rain anymore. "You think I like being angry?" he said quietly. "You think I want to blow up on people? I can't stop it. It's like there's always this pressure, and nobody gets it." "I do," Hank said softly. "That's the worst part." The storm raged around them, and in the dim, wet shelter of that rock shelf, the silence between them shifted. Not gone, not healed, but no longer hollow. They stayed like that for an hour, listening, breathing, not running. When the rain slowed, they rebuilt the fire just outside the shelter. Wet bark, stubborn sparks, steam rising from everything. Lucas took off his hoodie, wrung it out, and sat close. "You think that guy Travis made it through the storm?" he asked. Hank tossed another branch into the flame. "Probably. Men like him usually do." Lucas poked at the fire with a stick. "Still think we'll find the river tomorrow?" Hank nodded. "Unless the river finds us first." Lucas chuckled, low and brief. Then, without looking up, he said, "If we make it out of here, can I come back sometime? Not with Mom, just us?" Hank's voice cracked, just a little. "You don't even have to ask." They reached it just after noon. The trees parted, and there it was, wide, cold, and rushing fast. The river. Not the trickle from earlier, not the stream that soaked Lucas's boots. This was the real one, the kind you could follow to somewhere that had roads or cabins or signs with cell towers beyond them. Lucas exhaled. We actually made it. Hank rested a hand on his knee. "Told you rivers are like people, loud, unpredictable, but always headed somewhere." They filled their canteens and sat on a flat rock to eat the last 2 granola bars chocolate chip, damp from the pack, but still intact. Lucas was quieter now, but not the same kind of quiet as before, not the angry, shut-down kind. This was something different, a stillness. "I dreamed about my dad last night," he said suddenly. Hank looked over. "He was sitting in the car," Lucas went on, eyes on the water. "Just staring at the steering wheel. I kept yelling at him, but he wouldn't turn around." Hank didn't speak. "I think part of me thought he left me, not Mom, that he couldn't look at me without seeing whatever was broken in them." "I remember that look," Hank said. "He had it when he was 13, too, after I left." Lucas turned to him. Hank continued. He thought he wasn't enough, that my leaving was his failure. Took him years to say it, and by the time he did, he was already a father. Lucas stared at the rocks. "So what changed?" "Nothing," Hank said honestly, "except I stopped running." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the rush of water and the distant cry of a hawk. Then Lucas stood. "Let's follow it," he said, "before I forget what not giving up feels like." The river wound along an old game trail. The walk was easier now, the air lighter, the sun warm again. They passed fox tracks in the mud, a snapped branch where a deer had brushed through, a tree someone had carved with MJ 1992 in a crooked heart. "Think they're still together?" Lucas asked, touching the bark. "Maybe," Hank said, "or maybe they just remember this spot." 2 hours later, they spotted a cabin roof in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney. Lucas let out a whoop, arms in the air. Hank laughed for the first time all trip. As they approached, a woman in Ranger green stepped onto the porch, hand shielding her eyes. "Where the heck did you two come from?" "Lost Ridge," Hank said. "Took the scenic route." She grinned. "You came through Bear Loop without a map?" Lucas smiled. "We didn't come through it. We survived it." The ranger offered water, snacks, and a ride into the nearest town. They accepted. In the truck, watching the forest blur past, Lucas leaned against the window. "Next time," he said, "I bring the map." "Next time?" Hank raised an eyebrow. Lucas grinned. "We still have 3 days left." And Hank, eyes soft, just nodded. "Then next time," he said, "we start by getting lost on purpose." Lucas looked out at the winding road ahead. He didn't know exactly where it led or who he'd be when he got there, but for the first time in a long time, the not knowing didn't scare him. Some paths weren't made to be planned. Some were meant to be walked side by side, step by uncertain step, until you found what mattered. Not a way out, but a way through. Have you ever gotten lost, not on a map, but in life, and ended up finding someone instead? Tell us your story. Someone might need it.